Sabretooth, your brother, ready to die.
It's easy to decode the most intelligent trap set by a powerful mutant, but decoding their family trees in a world of X-Men is a far more demanding task. But you know, since it's my job to dissect them, today we're diving into Marvel's most feral mutant, Sabretooth, and his complicated family history. Sabretooth and Wolverine's rivalry has spanned over centuries, but it's also fascinating to see how, in different iterations, their dynamics are explored differently. And not just Wolverine, but it's really hard to decipher how many sons and daughters Sabretooth really has under his name. There are many false rumors, alternate timelines, abandoned children, and many more. But let's find out in today's video how many of them are truly his blood, and why the lore surrounding them is so puzzling. So without wasting another moment, let's dig in.
Cold, Father.
Just a mild fever. You'll be all right in the morning.
You always say that.
Who actually raised Victor Creed, and how reliable is that story? Victor Creed, aka Sabretooth, was a naturally born mutant with animalistic brutality. Superhuman strength, fast healing factor, and primal rage. All of these qualities were his personality from the very beginning. In the 2009 comic book X-Men Origins Sabretooth #1, one of the best supported accounts of his origin was presented in greater detail. Even though Victor was a mutant, his parents were normal human beings who failed to understand that their son was unique. His father, Zebediah Creed, thought Victor's animalistic rage was a demonic possession or something. So when his powers first began to unravel, his father tried to subdue them through methods of torture. After Victor killed his older brother Luther over a piece of pie, Zebediah had enough. He locked him up in a cellar, keeping him in chains, and used pliers to pull out his teeth one by one, which just made him even more feral and uncontrollable. It was only his mother, Victoria, who showed kindness to her son. Gradually growing out of control, Victor chewed his own hand to break free from the chains, and the first thing he did after this newfound freedom was kill his abusive father. Although he later claimed that he had killed his mother, later comics revealed that she actually survived, and Victor secretly ensured she was financially cared for. However, peace only lasted for a while as she was diagnosed with cancer and later killed in the hospital by a member of the Red Right Hand. By his early teenage years, Victor was already roaming the streets, and later stories portray him as descending further into violence. The seeds of his psychopathic tendencies had already been sown, and there was no turning back. The sibling who died over a piece of pie, and the one he tormented for years. Okay, so according to Marvel canon, Victor is eventually depicted as having 3 siblings, his older brother Luther and his younger siblings Saul and Clara. While Luther appears in X-Men Origins Sabretooth #1, Saul and Clara were introduced later in Origin 2. In X-Men Origins Sabretooth #1, Victor's older brother Luther taunted him over a piece of pie, telling him he wasn't allowed to have any. This enraged the young Victor and triggered the first manifestation of his mutant powers. His fangs and claws emerged as he pounced on Luther, killing him instantly. Well, things could have been managed, but his father's idiocy made it even worse, as I said before. Well, after eventually breaking free of his parents' control. Following his escape, Sabretooth's bloodlust increased over time. He would torment his younger brother Saul every year on his birthday. When Clara later told him that Logan had killed Saul after Saul betrayed both Logan and Clara to Nathaniel Essex, it struck a nerve. Not because Victor cared for Saul, but because someone else had taken away his favorite plaything. He tracked Logan down to a crime scene, unconscious, and brought him to Nathaniel Essex's lab. And that's where the classic animosity between Wolverine and Sabretooth really kicked off. The son Mystique never told him about. Do you know that Wolverine and Sabretooth once worked together in a CIA Black Ops unit called Team X? Yes, in X-Men Volume 2, Issues 5 and 6, Sabretooth joined Team X, working alongside his archenemy Logan and Maverick against the Soviet Union. They were on a mission to retrieve the C synthesizer, but the biggest obstacle was the Soviets' most powerful and newly awakened mutant, Omega Red. Although Wolverine and Maverick remained focused on the mission, Sabretooth's violent tendencies quickly complicated the operation. During the mission, he created a distraction by damaging Omega Red's containment system, but he never actually sided with Omega Red. During one of the missions in Germany in the mid-60s, he met Lenny Zauber, a government spy with whom he fell in love and became intimate. As a result, Mystique, disguised as Lenny Zauber, gave birth to their son, Graydon Creed, but Sabretooth never knew he had a child. What Victor also didn't know was that Lenny was actually Mystique in disguise, infiltrating German espionage operations to gather intelligence during the Cold War. Hoping to have a mutant child, Mystique became intimate with Victor, but after realizing that Graydon was an ordinary human, she abandoned him in an orphanage. As Graydon grew up and discovered his parental identity, he couldn't bring himself to like his reckless mutant parents. He hated them so much that he founded an anti-mutant group called Friends of Humanity and joined the upstarts to track down his parents to take revenge on them. However, it didn't really work out in his favor. Graydon was killed multiple times across different storylines. His first major death was at the hands of a future version of Mystique, while his cyborg incarnation, Bad Seed, was later killed by Sabretooth during the Sabretooth War. He was also killed in other storylines by characters such as Hope Summers and Lady Deathstrike. The first death occurred during his presidential campaign when a future version of Mystique assassinated her son. Later, he was resurrected and given a new form and some powers during the Sabretooth War storyline. Trapped in an alternate universe, he transformed into a cyborg, taking the codename of Bad Seed, and came to take revenge on his father as well as mutant kind. But in a final battle at Krakoa, it was Sabretooth who put an end to him by ripping his heart out of his body. Why Nightcrawler keeps getting called Sabretooth's family, and why that's outdated. The confusion is valid here because Graydon Creed and Nightcrawler, aka Kurt Wagner, are half-brothers, so many fans assume that Nightcrawler might be linked to Sabretooth in some way, but it's not really true. Yes, Nightcrawler is a biological son of Mystique, and there was a lot of confusion about who the father was, but the recent 2023 retcon has cleared up the fog around his paternal identity. When Chris Claremont first conceived the character, he intended Mystique to be one of Nightcrawler's biological parents through her shape-shifting abilities. However, that idea was not adopted in Marvel's published canon at the time, and Nightcrawler was instead presented as Azazel's son until the 2023 retcon restored Claremont's original concept. In 2023, the original idea finally found its place in the official canon. It turned out that Mystique and Destiny, her longtime partner, became the biological parents of Kurt. It was, after all, a shape-shifted male body like Mystique that impregnated Destiny and had Kurt as their son, further proving that Kurt had no blood relation with Sabretooth whatsoever. Although Graydon and Nightcrawler were meant to be brothers, Graydon hated the mutants and never liked Kurt anyway. The rest of Mystique's family, who belonged to her tree and not to Sabretooth's. In the original Marvel continuity, meaning Earth 616, Mystique has 3 children we know of, and only one of them, Graydon Creed, is the beastly Sabretooth. However, fans often mistake Mystique's other children for Sabretooth's offspring, but that's exactly where you can get it wrong. So let me clarify. Well, the first thing to remember is that Sabretooth and Mystique were never a lovey-dovey couple. People often mistake some crazy fan art for the official canon lore, where they just bumped into each other only to part ways for good, so there wasn't really anything romantic between them to idealize. Mystique's adopted daughter Rogue, aka Anne-Marie, was raised in Mississippi. She ran away from her family and then found guidance in Mystique and Destiny. Similarly, Nightcrawler, as I said, has no connection to Sabretooth. Even in alternate future timelines, Mystique had children such as Raze Darkholme, whom she had with Wolverine, and Charles Xavier II, whom she had with Professor X. They also have no connection to Sabretooth whatsoever. But there is a tiny bit of connection between Victor Creed and Mystique's partner, Destiny, regarding Destiny's daughter, Justine, who was killed by the Savage Mutant as a vengeful act against Mystique. Justine was Destiny's elder daughter, whom she gave birth to years before her union with Mystique. Although Justine had nothing to do with Sabretooth or Mystique, she and her husband, Cole Chase, were brutally killed by the mutant beast. Their son, Trevor Chase, survived the assassination, but it left him an orphan with traumatic memories. The paternity myth that keeps circulating about Laura Kinney. Okay, now things are getting interesting since we've come to the most complicated family tie. Sabretooth formed a connection with his nemesis Wolverine. Yeah, not with him exactly, but his daughter Laura Kinney. In the 2025 comic book X-Men Age of Revelation, Laura Kinney takes the codename of Sabretooth, which leaves the entire Marvel fandom in utter shock, as everyone started wondering why she would take her father's blood-sworn enemy's codename instead of the usual Wolverine moniker. Well, because in the Age of Revelation future timeline, Laura is married to Zane Creed, the future son of Victor Creed, aka Sabretooth. Here, Zane is neither a feral mutant like his father, nor an anti-mutant human like Graydon Creed. He's a deceased heroic figure who fought against injustice under the codename of his father, Sabretooth. So, as a tribute to her late husband, Laura takes up the Sabretooth codename in honor of her late husband. Although she initially fights alongside Revelation, she later regains her independence and turns against his regime. I know there's some confusion around Laura that she could be the biological daughter of Sabretooth only because of this particular comic line, but it was nothing but a misconception. Laura was originally introduced as a female clone of Wolverine under the designation X-23. Later comics revealed that Sarah Kinney also contributed genetic material, making Laura the biological daughter of both Sarah Kinney and Logan rather than a pure clone. Geneticist Sarah Kinney was experimenting on Wolverine's damaged DNA, trying to create a clone of him, and since the Y chromosome had been destroyed, she had to use 2 X chromosomes to create a female clone of Logan. The later retcons said that the extra X chromosome belonged to Sarah Kinney herself, making Sarah Kinney the biological mother of Laura. As Laura grew up, her mutant powers began to manifest. Sarah secretly gave her teachings to embrace her humanity, but unfortunately, a chemical scent triggered the violence inside her, which forced her to kill her mother, Sarah Kinney, in a fit of rage. Laura fell victim to her uncontrollable, manipulated powers, but later she united with Wolverine and formed a close father-daughter relationship with him, the Morlock who is sometimes mistaken for family and isn't. One of the Morlocks, who later went on to join X-Force and finally ended up in the Mutant Liberation Front, was Maria Calasantos, aka Feral. She falls under the same category of mutants as Wolverine and Sabretooth, especially for her cat-like facial features, sharp claws, and heightened animalistic senses. But Maria shares no blood connection with either Wolverine or Sabretooth. Rather, Marvel has explicitly shown her as one of Sabretooth's enemies. Maria grew up in extremely impoverished conditions, alongside her 3 siblings, Lucia, Mateo, and Carolina. But after tragedy in her family, she and Lucia left home and took shelter in the underground mutant group of Morlocks. Lucia was also a mutant, with the same feline features and strength, but neither of them came close to Wolverine or Sabretooth in terms of their powers and abilities. On M-Day, when Wanda declared no more mutants, leaving almost the entirety of the mutant population to lose their powers, Feral also became a depowered mutant. In Wolverine Volume 3, during the Evolution storyline, a feral Sabretooth attacked Feral and Thorn. Later continuity complicated this storyline by identifying Sabretooth as one of Romulus's clones rather than definitively the original Victor Creed, who captured and attacked Feral and her sister Lucia, aka Thorn, in the Weapon X facility. Although Thorn was severely wounded, Feral lost her life during the attack. So, if you have a misconception that Sabretooth could be the progenitor of Feral and her siblings, let me tell you that it's entirely untrue. Rather than giving them life, Sabretooth was responsible for Feral's death and nearly killed Thorn. Is Victor Creed even still alive right now? So last time I checked, Sabretooth was dead and hadn't been resurrected yet. But you know it's a Marvel storyline, and someone who died in this universe might not remain dead for so long. Wolverine has been killed several times and has been resurrected again and again. So why wouldn't the same thing happen with Victor Creed? Well, in the Sabretooth War, he was finished off pretty permanently by Wolverine in the land of Krakoa. After years of being tormented by his enemy, Logan finally used the anti-healing blade of Muramasa and chopped Sabretooth into pieces. As of now, he has not returned in a physical form, and no confirmed physical resurrection has taken place. Yet. However, in later comics, Victor did come back, but only through Wolverine's hallucinations and psychological manipulation. Because, after all, their animosity had spawned over centuries, so it's kind of impossible to entirely shake off the memories of his favorite enemy. The multiverse versions that flip this family on its head. When Chris Claremont first came up with a rival duo of Wolverine and Sabretooth, he actually wanted to keep a secret blood connection between them, but in the original Marvel continuity, the connection was only hinted at before it was ultimately nullified by a DNA test performed by S.H.I.E.L.D. However, it always left a lingering question as to why Sabretooth would think of Wolverine as his biological son. In Wolverine Volume 2, issues 41 to 42, a wounded Wolverine under the sewer was having a hallucination of his traumatic past when his enemy, Sabretooth, popped in, declaring himself Wolverine's actual father in his most psychologically twisted manner. It bothered Wolverine, but later S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Jane Connolly assured him that it wasn't the truth. Fans, however, had always wanted to experience a storyline where Sabretooth was Logan's father. And it finally occurred when Chris Claremont brought alternate timelines to explore this connection. In Earth 1610, the Ultimate Universe, Victor claimed that he was Wolverine's son, although the claim was never reliably confirmed. Meanwhile, in Earth 161, Claremont established the connection by making Sabretooth Wolverine's biological father. However, the relationship status once again changed in Earth 77,013, where Wolverine became Victor's baby brother, neither his enemy nor his son. So it is weird that across the multiverse, Wolverine and Sabretooth became more than just enemies. Writers have manipulated their relationship and flipped their dynamics in whatever way they pleased. The lore of these alternate realities never carried much weight like the actual original comics, but it was a good piece of trivia for fans to enjoy the iconic duo in a new light. The Age of Apocalypse version, who has a completely different family. Hold on, because I'm not yet done with the alternate reality versions of Sabretooth's family trees, and one of them, Earth 295, needs special recognition, as this is the timeline where everything is flipped entirely. In Earth 295, during the Age of Apocalypse, the Sabretooth we got to see is entirely different from his original counterpart in Earth 616. In this particular universe, Victor Creed is a heroic figure who uses his mutant powers in a positive way to save people rather than showing brutality. In this universe, his bonding with Blink, aka Clarice Ferguson, fostered his emotional side, which was rarely explored in the original Marvel continuity. When Blink was held captive in a breeding pen of Mr. Sinister, it was Victor who found her and saved her life. Victor took her under his wing and raised her as his foster daughter. He raised Blink to become a powerful mutant before she finally made her way into the X-Men. In the same universe, we also got a different version of Graydon Creed, who is not a mutant-hating extremist here, but a member of the Exterminated, a human resistance group against Apocalypse. He's a soldier and a demolisher whose code name is Horror Show, but similar to Earth 616, he harbored deep resentment towards his biological father, Sabretooth. However, in the end, when exterminators attacked the universe, Graydon and Sabretooth chose to set aside their conflicts and teamed up to save the world from the exterminators. But it ended pretty badly, as both the father and son were killed by their opponents while they were rescuing people from the attackers. How the Fox film universe rewrote this entire family. The very first time Sabretooth got a cinematic portrayal was in the Fox Universe's X-Men, released in 2000. Wrestler Tyler Mane portrayed a fierce and brutal Sabretooth with long blonde hair, hairy eyebrows, and exaggerated facial features. He didn't have much dialogue in that film, and his primary role was the enforcer of Magneto, although at the end of the film, Cyclops knocked him off the Statue of Liberty with a powerful optic blast. The films didn't deal with the brotherhood between the two rivals until X-Men Origins Wolverine came out in 2009, when Sabretooth, portrayed by Liev Schreiber, became the half-brother of Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. Yes, the rivalry finally turned into the most awaited brotherhood that comic fans have always wanted to see. In this movie, it was revealed that both Victor and Wolvie share the same father, Thomas Logan, who revealed this information while he was taking his last breath. Wolverine killed Thomas Logan, only to find out that he was actually his biological father, not John Howlett. After that, he teamed up with his half-brother Sabretooth and fought in several crucial wars, like the American Civil War, World War I and II, as well as the Vietnam War, where their accelerated healing factor and primal animalistic strength came in handy. But finally, the film followed the original comic book roots and placed them together with Stryker's Black Op unit's Team X. Victor Creed's growing bloodlust became a matter of concern, which disgusted Wolverine. Their brotherhood got fractured, and they finally turned on each other. Well, that's how Fox Universe treated their connections, which I think worked pretty dramatically, and especially because of their complicated arcs in the comics. And that's it, guys. Sabretooth's complicated family history has many branches all across the multiverse, but I've just talked about some of the most notable ones, sharing your thoughts on Sabretooth's maze of blood ties. Until then, goodbye, and I'll see you in the next one.